Hi, my name is Jay Carter. Before I tell you this story of heartbreak, let me briefly introduce you to Sarah, my ex-wife. I jog a couple of miles around the lake every morning when work allows. I'm 6 egros and 195 lbs and in good shape. I swim several laps a week and hit a classic boxing gym twice to lift weights and spar with my trainer, Coach Dave. While I'm no Chuck Norris, I can handle myself, and those 195 lbs are mostly muscle. I have a master's in computer science from MIT and a postgraduate degree in business from Wharton, but people say I have a passing resemblance to Ryan Reynolds. I got my degrees while my father was serving at the U.S. consulate in Berlin, and I stayed to finish my studies after he returned to the States. I now own and manage my own software company. My core product is a new base program for AI-powered security systems designed to automatically manage and fix network problems in real time. It should be ready to launch within a year. I love my sister Lisa, and she loves me. We're 3 years apart and never keep secrets from each other. She's a junior partner at a prestigious legal firm in Boston, working as a corporate attorney. Sarah, my ex-wife, stays in shape with Pilates at least 4 times a week and is 5'4" and 115 lbs. She has a killer figure with a C-cup, 24-inch waist and 34-inch hips, with fiery red hair and bright green eyes that match her temper. Her smile lights up a room. She's a corporate lawyer at Innovate Solutions, a PR marketing agency. We first met at a work conference where my sister Lisa introduced us. We were living just 5 miles apart in the same medium-sized town of Clearwater, Florida. We started dating 3 months later and clicked instantly. Within 3 months, we were married. I was a software engineer for Delta Tech, assembling code for flight controllers, making a mid-5-figure salary plus bonuses. Sarah was just starting her career at Innovate Solutions with a low 5-figure salary. My parents left me a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. My sister got a lump sum inheritance. Sarah's family remained in Boston, while my parents had retired to Arizona. We all got together for Thanksgiving and Christmas twice a year at different locations. Life was good. We were happy with our modest income, nice cars, and 3 vacations a year. 1 year later, Sarah was promoted to junior partner, and things started to change. She began going to late dinners with clients a few times a month and worked later. Naturally, I was suspicious. I went about my usual business, reading her emails, checking her text messages, and even installing a keylogger on her laptop. I know I was being paranoid, but just because you're worried doesn't mean they aren't out to get you. I even followed her one evening. Nothing unusual. She didn't even interact with anyone else. So why did I feel our marriage was falling apart? Sarah wanted to make senior partner before we had a family, which would take another 3 years. She was content with her career. My job, however, was starting to burn me out, and there was no path for promotion. Since it was a family-owned business, only family members, even if they were completely incompetent, were promoted. I decided to start my own software consulting firm. I didn't want the kind of business where people bring their laptops for repair. My focus was on businesses that needed better security systems and system upgrades. I did a business study and projected a slow start, but within a year, I would be making more than I was at my current job. I sat down with Sarah to explain that although all forecasts indicated we'd be better off in the long run, the next year would be tough. I didn't want to complicate things, so I didn't tell her about the new AI software I was building. She was completely against it, asking why I would risk everything when we were doing so well. We'd always kept our money separate, except for a joint account for bills. We each contributed equally to pay the monthly expenses and saved the rest for ourselves. I left my job and launched the new business using my savings and a loan on my house. I rented a small workshop with an office attached and started advertising. Within 3 months, I was happy and breaking even. My work on the new AI was also progressing nicely. One evening, Sarah delivered a shocking blow. She told me she was 2 months pregnant with triplets. My paranoia immediately kicked in. I thought about her trip to Denver for an important client. I realized she was cheating and instantly decided to get a DNA test. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, she became distant, fearing for the baby's health. She insisted on a few months' dry spell, even though I told her she was overreacting, and her doctor told her the same. We did all the normal things. I went to relaxation classes with her, massaged her feet every night, and rubbed lotion on her belly to ease stretch marks, putting up with her progressively worsening moods. Meanwhile, my company was taking off. I hired a recent college grad, Mark, and a receptionist, Chloe. Sarah seemed uninterested, so I never bothered to talk about my business with her. One afternoon, I was with a client talking about a server upgrade when I got the call. "The babies are on their way. Come right away." My client listened and told me to leave and wished me good luck. I had been preparing for weeks. Sarah didn't need to call an ambulance since I didn't live far from her. She was waiting at home, her go bag ready. I got her into the car, went back for her suitcase and the DNA kit, and drove her to the hospital. She was admitted to a prenatal ward with a private room. The doctor said it would be a while. I was still excited about becoming a father, despite my doubts about the triplets' paternity. The doctor told me to go home, saying she would call me in time for the delivery. I went home, ate, waited, and fell asleep. The phone rang. Sarah was fully dilated and having contractions every 7 minutes. The babies were almost here. 2:30 a.m., I grabbed a coat. I hurried to my car and arrived at the hospital in record time. "Just in time," the doctor smiled. A few minutes later, the first baby was born, followed by 2 more. The nurse checked their fingers and toes and cleaned them. While her back was turned, I swabbed each child for the DNA test. I'd already felt a connection with them and hoped they were mine, but I had to be sure. Sarah looked at me with sad eyes and said she loved me when I kissed her. I was told to leave since Sarah was being taken to recovery to get some sleep. The next day, I called everyone to share the good news. The grandparents were especially thrilled and eager to meet their new grandchildren. Lisa and Amy promised to try to get some time off to visit their niece and nephews. I dropped off the DNA kit on my way to the hospital, carrying a lot of flowers for Sarah. They told me it would take about 2 weeks. Sarah would stay at the hospital because she had a serious tear that needed to heal. I visited her for the next 3 days, but she seemed distant and quiet. When I asked the doctor, he said she would get over it, that it happens sometimes. When I visited her on Thursday, her doctor said she would be released Friday evening. I counted down the hours, having the nursery ready for our new babies. Friday morning, I double-checked that everything was ready and the safety car seats were securely fastened. At 1:30, I headed to the hospital to pick up my family. I went straight to her room, but it was empty. I asked the nurse where my wife and kids were. She said another man had already picked them up. When I asked who, she couldn't tell me. I tried Sarah's cell, but couldn't get through. A senior nurse came to investigate and reported the incident to security, who then called the police. The arriving cops turned out to be 2 detectives, as this was a probable child abduction. They were shown the security footage from that morning. When they returned, they said Sarah appeared to have left with the man willingly. They would investigate, as they had identified the man but would not tell me who he was. They advised me to go home and wait for their call. Feeling sick, I sat at home, waiting for news. Around 7 that evening, I saw the same 2 detectives knocking on my door. When neither of them would look me in the eye, I asked what was going on. The female detective spoke first. "Mr. Carter, we can't tell you where your wife and children are, but they are safe. I'm so sorry." "Why won't Sarah answer her phone? And where is my family?" The male detective spoke next. "I regret to inform you that your wife has left you and taken the kids. Again, I'm sorry. She said her attorney would be in touch soon. Please don't do anything foolish until you hear from him. I would hate to have to put you in custody." They left, and I was alone again. My hands were shaking. I felt hollow inside, and I wanted to be sick. My devastation was total. I had hit rock bottom. I started to cry. I woke up the next morning, having cried myself to sleep. I showered, put on clean clothes, and made breakfast on autopilot. I felt a little better after eating and thought maybe Sarah's parents knew something. Her dad answered the phone and said everyone was gone, but would be visiting next weekend. I told him what had happened, and he said he couldn't believe Sarah would act that way and would call her and get back to me. It was almost lunchtime, so I went to a local diner and ordered a truly unhealthy meal. A mega burger, fries with onion rings, and a beer. Feeling a little better, I returned home and checked our answering machine for messages. There were none. I turned on the TV but was more focused on replaying the events of the last few days, trying to make sense of it all. I finally gave up and looked at the clock. It was past midnight. I went to bed. My mind wouldn't shut down, so I gave up at 5 in the morning, got up, showered, and went downstairs for breakfast. I sat staring at the news on TV, wondering what to do next. The phone rang. Sarah's attorney asked if I could make a meeting later that day. We agreed on 3 p.m., and he hung up. Maybe now I would get some answers. I arrived at his office and was shown in immediately. I expected to see only her attorney, but Scott Miller, her boss, was also sitting there. I decided to wait for them to speak first, which made them anxious. The lawyer finally broke the silence. Mr. Carter, you're here to discuss the terms of your divorce from Mrs. Sarah Carter. Your wife and Mr. Miller have a brief proposal. She divorces you for irreconcilable differences. You keep your business, your house, your retirement, and all your savings. She does the same. But you also sign a document authorizing Mr. Miller to adopt your children. For this, Mr. Miller will deposit $3 million into an account of your choice. I got up, almost knocking over the desk. No way. My children are not for sale at any price. You can keep the tramp for nothing. I want nothing to do with her. Fuck off. Sarah stood up and spoke softly in a conciliatory tone. Look, Jake, I know I messed up, and I'm truly sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Scott and I have been seeing each other for a while, and we're very much in love and want to get married. Scott wants to adopt our kids since he, unfortunately, can't have his own. The kids would have everything they could possibly want or need. The best schools, a beautiful house to grow up in, and a fantastic start to life. What can you provide? An old, inherited house and a small, struggling software shop? Why do you think I want out of your failure of a marriage with no ambition and no money? At least let the children have a chance. If you refuse to sign, I will take you for everything you have. I'll take your house, half your income in support, half your savings, your 401k, your business, and on top of that, I'll make sure you never see your kids again. You're in a no-win situation, so at least our way gives you something. Fuck you, Sarah. First, you have no claim to the house. It's mine alone. Half of nothing is still nothing. I have no savings to speak of. You make more than I do, so support will be minimal. I'll gladly pay child support for them, even if I only see them every other weekend. As for my company, without me, there is no business. And for your information, I have no 401k for you to take. I'll see you in court. Then I stood up and left, leaving 3 shocked people behind. I drove straight to the grill and ordered dinner and a beer. After dinner, I drove home to a cold, empty house. I sat there with a beer, still seething. I woke up around 11 from a knock at the door. Still a little groggy, I didn't check the peephole before opening it. As I opened the door, it was slammed inward with such force that I staggered back but managed to stay on my feet. 2 men rushed into the room, trying to grab me. I was wide awake now. The first one went down after a swift kick to the knee. The second one tried to get me in a headlock. He had me pinned, but while I was trying to break free, the first man got back up and kicked me in the ribs. I started to lose consciousness as they both kicked me. I knew I was going to pass out, so I had to leave a trail for the cops. The leader of the duo grabbed me by the jacket and said, "Be a nice boy and sign the paper, or we'll be back." He was right in my face, so I headbutted him on the nose and felt warm liquid shoot across my face. I pulled a hair from his jacket and put it in my pocket. Now I had his DNA. He clutched his face, turned away, screaming and calling me names. I started to black out, only to be awakened by another kick to the ribs. I passed out and fell down the wall. I woke up slowly, hearing voices but couldn't make out who they belonged to. I saw vague shapes of people in the room but couldn't tell who they were. Then darkness returned. When I woke up the next time, bright sunlight was streaming through the window. I looked around and saw a woman sitting in a chair. It took a moment to place her. It was Brenda, the wife of my boxing coach, Dave. I tried to talk, but my mouth was too dry. I just croaked. She looked up and came over to touch the call button. A nurse came in, checked my vitals, and smiled, asking how I felt. She went away for a few seconds and came back with some ice chips for me to chew. They tasted better than the best whiskey, I swear. Brenda was holding my hand while dialing with the other. "How do you feel?" "Glad to see you're back among the living, Jake. You gave us quite a scare for a while there. Like I've been hit by a truck. A truck would have probably done less damage." A doctor came into the room just then. "I'm glad you finally woke up. You've been in a coma for 3 days, but I think you've turned the corner now. Do you think you can eat something?" "Doc, I could eat a cow. Just pull out the horns and wipe his ass first." Everyone laughed at that, but when I tried to laugh with them, my side hurt so much I almost passed out. The doctor changed my painkillers, showed me how to click the button for more morphine, and said he would be back soon. I lay in a semi-morphine-induced sleep for what felt like hours, but it was just over an hour when Coach Dave arrived. Coach Dave told me what happened. I had been attacked in my house. My neighbor who was on patrol saw my front door open and went to investigate, finding me lying in a pool of blood. They called an ambulance and the police, who found Coach Dave's number on my phone under ICE in case of emergency. He and Brenda had been with me the entire time. He told me about my serious injuries. My left shin bone was fractured, my arm was shattered, 2 of my ribs were broken, my left lung was punctured, my kidney was lacerated, my eye socket was cracked, and my nose was broken. Other than that, he said, I was good, which made me laugh again. I choked, but the pain wasn't as bad. When I was no longer in danger, Brenda and Coach Dave left to go home. A detective entered the room, introducing himself as Detective Williams. He asked how much of the attack I remembered. I told him everything, including the message the thug's leader sent. He was very interested. When I told him I had a DNA sample on a piece of fabric from his jacket, he seemed quite happy and put it in an evidence bag. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, he was gone, and the darkness outside had deepened. When Coach Dave visited the next day, he said I could stay at his house once I was released. When I asked him to pick up the mail from my house, he said he would get it on his way home. When I asked if he knew any good divorce lawyers, he said he did and would get back to me. After a while, I nodded off again. The nurse woke me up saying everything looked good and clean, free of any infection, as she changed my bandages. Food was served shortly after. Eating with one arm is a challenge, and the nurse had to cut my food for me. I slept well and woke up rested. The nurse gave me a bed bath. I was still in too much pain to get an erection. Coach Dave arrived with a stunningly beautiful woman he introduced as my new attorney, Jennifer Stone. She said she would take my case and that I still had visiting privileges with my children. We went over the facts together. She left. I went through the mail Coach Dave had picked up. I was enraged when I saw the DNA results. Then I started to giggle. The results showed that one child was mine, but the other 2 were not. Sarah was cheating on both me and Scott. I stopped laughing and explained what this meant to Coach Dave, and he almost passed out. I called Jennifer and told her I had changed my mind and wanted to talk about a settlement. I asked her to arrange a meeting between Sarah, Scott, their attorney, and myself at the hospital. She set it up for the next day in a borrowed office. When Coach Dave wheeled me into the office with my arm and leg in plaster and tubes from IVs, Sarah's face looked like a ghost. My face was a mass of black and blue. Sarah seemed shocked when she saw me, while Scott just smirked. I looked at my enemies and spoke. Well, I changed my mind after some friends of yours visited. And don't even pretend you didn't set this up, Scott. The last words your thug said were, "Sign the papers." Why would anyone else have said that unless you sent them? My attorney has drawn up a new contract for me to sign that allows you to adopt the children without the $3 million inducement. My attorney explained that your document made it look like I was selling the children to you. And since it is illegal to sell another human being, this would have opened the door for me to be charged with human trafficking. 10 out of 10 for effort, though. I handed the document to their attorney, who looked at it suspiciously. I continued, My lawyer and I have created a new settlement for you to sign. It's all in here. My lawyer gave the documents to their attorney, with copies for Sarah and Scott. I spoke again. This agreement is as different from yours as night is from day. Let me walk you through it. I keep my house and everything in it, including my savings, my business, both cars, and my wife's jewelry. She also deposits the entire $22,000 from her not-so-secret account with Coastal Savings into my attorney's escrow account. You bastard! That's my money. I earned it. You can't have it, my wife stammered. She was bright red and a vein was pulsing in her neck. Scott gave her a strange look. I guess he didn't know about her secret account. He gently pulled her back into her seat, still grinning at me. I think that was the first nail in their relationship's coffin. If he hadn't loved the kids so much, he might have dumped her right then and there. Stay seated and shut the fuck up, you deceitful bitch. The grown-ups are talking, and you are not one of them. Everyone except Coach Dave, who was stifling a laugh, seemed to be holding back a smile. Sarah went from red to pale and stayed silent. Before I was so rudely interrupted, I was saying that since she earns so much more than I do, she will also pay me spousal support totaling $3,000 per month into my attorney's account. And you both, as representatives of the company you work for, will pay for breaking up my marriage and for my current injuries. You will pay me $12 million net of tax also into my attorney's account, plus all my medical costs, legal fees, and the entire cost of my aftercare to be determined by my attorney. All of the above will be paid by Friday evening at 5 p.m. Scott stood there, laughing uncontrollably. You're delusional. Why should we pay you everything we have? We came here for this. 25%. What? I said, 25%. I heard you the first time, but what does that mean? That's the projected loss of income in the first 2 years after a court ruling against your company, citing culpability in the dissolution of my marriage and the alienation of my wife and children. Did you just pull that number out of thin air? You made this whole thing up, he asked. No, I researched your company's clients and pay scale in great detail. Since you're a publicly traded corporation, all the information is easily accessible on your website. It's all completely legal. Just think about how this will affect your father's campaign for governor. They're running on a family values platform after all. Then there's your clientele. You have a lot of Hollywood and political figures on your client list. One whiff of scandal and they'll abandon ship. And then your marketing branch. You have 2 children's clothing stores, a baby product company, and a sports equipment manufacturer. Every brand will drop you like a hot potato. When all the garbage hits the fan during a board meeting, you will be revealed as the sacrificial lamb. So I think you'll find $12 million is a reasonable settlement. Scott looked quite unwell now, no longer so arrogant. My attorney will send you the full amount. Better yet, she should have it in her account by Friday at 5 o'clock. After that, no one had anything to say, but I could see Scott was still considering his escape. I continued. Oh, and Scott, if you think my disappearance will allow you to reconsider, I've already sent the entire story to 5 attorneys out of state. If anything happens to me, they'll notify the media. The look on his face suggested that I had guessed his plan. He seemed completely defeated now. As we were walking away, I called over my shoulder, 5 p.m. Friday. After we left and returned to my room, Jennifer asked me why I had given up and let Scott adopt my children after I had been so against it earlier. She looked over the DNA test results I handed her and started to giggle. You cunning bastard, the children aren't all yours. I'm not sure, but I want to investigate. This shows she was cheating on both Scott and me at the same time. And when I find out, I'll make sure Scott finds out too. Jake, I'd hate to be on your bad side. You should have been a lawyer. Thanks, but I lack the killer instinct. Actually, you don't. You just haven't had to use it yet. When the doctor checked in later that day, she told me I could go home the next day as long as I had help. I moved in with Coach Dave and Brenda temporarily, which is what I did. I still had to visit the hospital twice a week to change my dressings and empty a bottle containing my urine to check that my kidney had healed. Friday arrived, and I anxiously waited for 5 p.m. I shouldn't have worried. My attorney called at 3:30 and said the money had been transferred to the escrow account, showing a total of $12,987.150. Fuck, I was rich, far richer than I could have ever imagined. Jennifer had already paid her share and transferred the remaining balance to my checking account. Life went on. After 10 weeks of loving care from my friends, I returned to my house but felt lonely. The place seemed empty and depressing. I decided to move to be closer to my sister, the one I loved the most. I went to my office and called a meeting with Mark and Chloe. I told them I needed a fresh start somewhere far away. I thanked them and told them how great they had done. Then I shocked them by giving them ownership of the business, including all the profits they had made while I was away. I said my goodbyes and took them both out to dinner. My next stop was to see my good friends Coach Dave and Brenda. I took them out to dinner and gave them a check for $750 for my convalescence care. They tried to refuse, but I told them Scott's company had to pay for my care, so it was really his money, not mine. They accepted. After dinner, we sat drinking a glass of wine, and I told them I was heading to California to be close to my sister. Coach Dave asked me what I planned to do with my house. I said I would probably rent it out. He started to fidget and seemed a little ashamed, so I told him to just say it. He told me his oldest son, Eric, had just graduated with an engineering degree and had a job lined up with a nearby company. Not only that, but he was getting married and his fiancée was pregnant, and they had nowhere to live. Would I be willing to rent him my house? They clearly didn't want to live with his parents, for understandable reasons. I told him to set the rent based on what they could reasonably afford and that I wanted the money to go into a college savings account for their newborn. Not only would I be giving a young couple a start, but I'd also be helping my friends. Brenda gave me such a tight hug that I think she broke my ribs again. Coach Dave was crying. The next day, I called Lisa to tell her what happened and asked if I could stay with her until I found a place of my own. She was overjoyed and started planning our activities. 4 weeks later, I closed the door on my house for the last time and shed a few tears on the drive over to hand the keys to Coach Dave. I also dropped off Sarah's title for her car and told him to give it to his son as a housewarming gift. We hugged, had a teary goodbye, and promised to stay in touch. After an exciting week-long road trip, I arrived at Lisa's house. I wasn't in a hurry, so I stopped whenever I felt like it. Lisa hugged me until I couldn't breathe, and then finally let me go. She led me to my room and told me we were going out for dinner with a friend. She said there was no need to dress up. Slacks and a shirt would be fine. We would meet her friend there for a casual dinner. As we arrived, Amy, Sarah's sister, was sitting at the table, waiting. We went to a nice diner with waiter service and a well-stocked bar. I knew I had been set up. At first I was furious, but I couldn't stay mad at Lisa for long, so I decided to just go with it. Amy stood up and hugged Lisa. To my surprise, she then hugged me and exclaimed what a bitch Sarah was and said she hoped she was in hell. Amy worked in accounts for a marketing company and lived nearby. The evening went quite well. When we got to the dance floor, Amy was the first to ask me to dance. We danced 2 waltzes and 1 slow dance, then returned to a smiling Lisa. You two look just like a couple out there, quite good together. Amy turned bright red, and I hurried back to the men's room. For the rest of the evening, I danced with both Amy and Lisa, but stayed away from the slow dances. At the end of the evening, we put Amy in a cab and called one for ourselves. When we got home, Lisa just laughed and went to bed, even though I scolded her for setting me up. We house hunted the next day. I preferred the routine of cleaning the yard and mowing the lawn over living in an apartment. It would also be useful for having people over or for hosting a barbecue or party. Although the house prices shocked me, we were in the commuter belt for Boston, so I had to bite the bullet and pay the money for what I wanted. After several weeks of searching, I found a 3-bedroom starter house with a separate living room and kitchen dining area. The fact that it was in a safe community with only one way in, past a security guard, really sold it to me. It also had a good-sized backyard and front lawn. The community had a pool with a gym and a play area for families with young children. Lisa loved it and joked that she wanted to move in with me. It also had a babysitting service. I had to furnish and decorate the house before I moved in, and I also had to buy all the usual items like towels and pots and pans. Luckily, it came with all the kitchen appliances, but I had to buy food and other basics. Amy and Lisa were fantastic at helping me decide what I needed, giving it a more homey touch and making it feel less like a man cave. I set up one area with a top-of-the-line computer on a desk, running my own motherboard and operating system. There was also a workbench, several cabinets, and of course, a fireproof safe. Lisa and Amy insisted I have a housewarming party. I didn't know anyone there, so the house was crowded with Lisa and Amy's friends. I think the goal was to get me to befriend some of the guests. It seemed to work, as I was now in multiple people's phones and social media buddy lists. The next 3 weeks were filled with parties and barbecues almost every weekend. I hardly ever thought about Sarah anymore. I was enjoying my newfound social life. During this time, Amy and I had grown close, more than friends, but not yet lovers. We were supposed to go to the theater with Lisa one evening, but Lisa called off at the last minute, saying she had a stomach ache. So Amy and I went alone. We were sitting there, watching A Midsummer Night's Dream, when Amy leaned over and grabbed my hand. I wasn't prepared, since the most we had done was a kiss on the cheek. After the play, we took a cab back to Amy's apartment. When I walked her to the door, the taxi turned away. I swore. It was nearly impossible to find a cab that far out of town. Amy just laughed. I said it wasn't funny and that I would have to walk 3 miles home. In that case, you'd better stay the night, she said. She then pulled my head down and gave me the most sensuous kiss I had ever had, took my hand, walked me to her front door, and pulled me in. She started making out with me right away as she led me to her bedroom. I was just standing there, staring blankly, when she said, "What does a woman have to do to get in bed with you? I've waited so long, I figured it was time for me to make the first move." That was the most amazing night I've ever had. Now let me return the favor. What did you do to me? I've never done that before. Thank God you're here. I'd never let you leave this bed. My sister must be insane to have given you up. We finally woke up around 2 p.m., realizing we were more hungry than we were tired. We went down to the local deli and ordered some coffee and lunch. After lunch, we returned to Amy's apartment to talk about what had happened. Amy said she'd been envious of her sister and had fancied me since we first met. After we split up, she confided in Lisa and asked for her help in getting us together. Naturally, Lisa was happy and said she was sure I would be interested once Sarah was out of the picture. I said I was interested as soon as I saw her at Lisa's, but I felt it would be a bit tacky to approach my wife's sister. Amy said she understood and was grateful that I'd considered her feelings before making a move, but she couldn't wait any longer. So she and Lisa had conspired to make last night happen. She said she didn't want me to think it was a rebound thing. We both laughed about it. Then Amy texted Lisa, "Mission accomplished." Amy drove me home so I could change, as I still had on yesterday's clothes. Amy was not like her sister. I felt completely at ease with her. There was no wondering when she would get upset and start a fight over the slightest thing. Lisa commented on it many times and seemed happy for us. We just seemed to fit. In the meantime, I had been working on my project, and it was finally finished. The beauty of this program and hardware was its adaptability. It could be adjusted for corporate use, gaming, aviation, and even automobile applications. I decided to contact one of the top game developers, knowing that their thorough testing by players would reveal any flaws. I was met with some skepticism when I approached the gaming company, since they believed they already had the best programmers in the world. After my presentation, they requested a 3-month trial. I agreed to provide them with sealed units and tamper-proof software. After the trial was over, they scheduled a meeting to move forward. I went with my sister, who is a corporate attorney, and one of her colleagues who specialized in this type of negotiation. Digital Forge Games wanted to buy the patents from me and paid a fair $150 million, knowing they could sell the patents and would also make 5 times that in game sales worldwide. I declared that I would only sell the manufacturing rights under license for a 10-year period, and I would seek $60 million and a 2% override on all applications using my hardware and software over the same period. After several hours, we agreed on a 10-year compromise of $75 million and 6%. The contracts were written, signed, and a handshake sealed the deal. I was suddenly a very rich man, even after taxes, but I wasn't done yet. I conducted similar negotiations with the military's civilian aerospace department and the top aircraft supplier, even one of the top automakers. After taxes, my cash terms were valued at more than $300 million, and with a 10-year estimate worth more than $4 billion, I couldn't comprehend the wealth I now possessed and sought guidance on investment. If I simply left it in the bank, the interest at a conservative estimate would be more than $15,000 before taxes. My sister was now dating another attorney, and Amy and I were living together. Things were getting quite serious. It had been just over a year since I left to start a new life, and I decided it was time to exact some revenge on the two people who had caused me so much pain. I sat down with Amy and told her I still wanted revenge on her sister, and asked if she was okay with it. She said, "Burn the bitch, and if I can help, just ask." We sat and plotted a few different scenarios, but ultimately decided to wait a little longer to execute our revenge. The phone rang right after we had finished dinner. It was the assistant DA from Clearwater, Florida. They had caught the men who had attacked me, and they wanted me to testify in 3 weeks. Of course, I agreed. When the time came, Amy insisted she come with me, so we agreed to make it a mini vacation and arrive a week before the trial. We flew the 2,500 miles to Florida. Coach Dave picked us up from the airport and dropped us off at our motel. To thank them, we took Coach Dave and Brenda to dinner at the Grand Ballroom at the Plaza. They had to wear their cocktail gowns. Amy and Brenda looked stunning, putting Coach Dave and me in the shadows. I wore my newly acquired 3,000 handcrafted Italian suit, while Coach Dave had on his best church outfit. The 4 of us looked like tourists. None of us had ever been to this restaurant before, as we could never have afforded it before my newfound wealth. We arrived in a limo. I wanted to make it a memorable experience for Coach Dave and Brenda. A uniformed doorman unlocked the car doors and then the restaurant door. The head waiter showed us to our seats. A lone pianist played gentle music as Coach Dave and Brenda looked around in awe. We ordered a light appetizer of melon and Parma ham, cut so thin you could see through it. Then we chose our main meals and a fruit salad to finish, all washed down with a full-bodied red and a white dessert wine. As we were enjoying our wine, I looked around the restaurant and noticed Sarah and her loser husband, Scott, sitting on the other side with another couple. I pointed them out to everyone. Amy said she had to use the ladies' room and got up to go. Brenda followed. Why do they always go in pairs? Of course, Sarah and her party had to pass them to get to the ladies' room. I watched as Amy stopped and greeted her. Amy pointed me out, and Sarah looked like she had seen a ghost, putting her hand over her mouth. Then Amy said something else that made Brenda laugh and walk away. Sarah and Scott bolted out of the restaurant. When the women came back, I asked what Amy had said to cause that reaction. Amy said after Brenda said hi, Sarah had asked who she was with. "I'm with another millionaire sitting over there," she said, pointing at me. "I have to thank you for divorcing your husband. We were meant to be together. You obviously traded down." Then she turned away. "I just don't see what you see in this stuffed monkey." We danced and laughed about Amy's encounter with her sister late into the evening. Coach Dave and Brenda had to work. Amy and I did touristy things and visited places. We even spent a day at a gun range, firing all kinds of weapons. Amy turned out to be a very good shot, much better than I could have imagined. We danced a lot and went out to dinner in the evenings. The day before the trial started, we went to dinner at Coach Dave and Brenda's house. I have to admit that home-cooked food tastes so much better than restaurant cuisine. After dinner, Coach Dave gave us the news that his son would be getting married in the spring. We all toasted their future happiness. When we met with the DA before the trial started, he informed us it was a slam dunk. My providing his DNA had helped them identify the leader of the duo. It turned out he had a record for violence, and this would be his 3rd strike. He was ready to testify against his companion, who was also in custody. The other guy's trial would take place after his testimony. He also said that the guy I had headbutted was still croaking like a frog because I had damaged his vocal cords. The only drawback was that neither of the men was willing to name Scott Miller. The DA believed that Miller had paid them off to remain silent, and no one wanted to upset his father, the senator, by charging his son with conspiracy to murder. We stayed for all 3 trials, and I was happy with the outcome. The leader received a 2-year reduced sentence for ratting out his friend. The other guy got 5 years. The one I headbutted got 3 years since he hadn't really participated in the attack. After Coach Dave and Brenda drove us to the airport, I handed Coach Dave an envelope and told him not to open it until we had taken off. I had put the deed to my former house inside as a wedding gift for his son. I'd only shown the deed to his son because I knew how delicate wedding vows could be. When we got home and settled in, I went into my office and called my sister, inviting her out to dinner on Friday night without telling Amy. Friday arrived, and I told Amy we were going to dinner with Lisa and her partner. Amy was happy. That evening, a limo picked us all up and drove us to a well-known restaurant that I had booked 3 weeks in advance. After a very filling dinner, we were sipping our wine when a man dressed as a gypsy with a violin stopped by our table to play a gypsy love ballad. The whole restaurant watched as I got down on one knee and proposed to Amy. Her expression was priceless. She said yes through happy tears to the loud applause of the entire restaurant. Lisa came around the table and hugged Amy, saying, "Welcome to the family." We danced the rest of the evening away before the limo picked us up and drove us home. The wedding was scheduled for early spring, and invitations were sent out. I wisely stayed out of the planning and let Amy and Lisa take the lead. We were married in a nearby church. I paid for all the out-of-town guests' hotel bills, reserving an entire floor of the Ritz-Carlton for their 3-day stay. Everyone had fun, and the wedding was a magnificent spectacle. Nick and Brenda asked us to their son's wedding in 2 months' time, saying they hadn't had so much fun in years. Amy and I spent 2 weeks sailing on an Alaskan cruise. We went on daily excursions and danced in the evenings. We came back exhausted, needing another vacation. I had very little to do, as I had assembled a troubleshooting team to handle any issues with my new software and hardware. I was in no hurry. I was playing the long game, organizing the next phase of my revenge. 10 months after we got home, our son, James, was born. His sister, Sarah, was born 15 months later. We had moved into a bigger house, but we stayed within the safe community. By this time, I was incredibly wealthy and had started to become a minor celebrity, attending different charity events where I gave generously. Amy and I were even featured in some society magazines, labeled as the perfect couple. I never gave up on my revenge. Everything they had done and tried to do still wounded me. 7 years had passed since my ex-wife left to trade up, and it was time to put phase 1 into motion. Over the past 3 years, I had a private investigation firm compiling information on Sarah, Scott, and everyone they were connected to, including her former boss, Robert Davis. I specifically sought a DNA profile of Robert, as I suspected he was the biological father of the other 2 children. The investigators found some fascinating information. 1, as I had guessed, the triplets belonged to Robert. 2, Sarah was still seeing 2 other men, and Robert on the side for a little fun. Scott had also been with his PA and a number of call girls. I started the first part of my plan. I sent Scott a copy of the triplets' DNA, along with Robert Davis's, with a letter that said, "You're infertile. The DNA of your triplets doesn't match yours, but it does match Robert Davis's. Do the math." This information made it abundantly clear that the other 2 children weren't mine, so Sarah had to have been with Robert while she was dating Scott. In other words, she was cheating on both of us at the same time. To stir the pot, I also emailed Scott a copy of her current affairs. Then, I backed off and watched the drama unfold. A couple of months later, Coach Dave called to tell me that Scott had kicked Sarah out and used their prenup to keep the kids, as he had legally adopted all 3. She was gone with nothing, and no one knew where she had gone. Amy called her parents to see if they knew anything. Her dad told her not to contact him again and said he had wired her a few $1,000s. She now knew what it felt like to be betrayed and lose her children. Phase 1 was complete. I assumed she still had her laptop, as her email was still active. I forwarded her the PI's report on Scott and some photos of him with his call girls, assuming I would be stirring the pot. That ought to create some turbulence in the divorce. A few days later, Amy and I were sitting in front of an old movie when the security gate's intercom chimed. I asked the guard on duty to wait a minute so I could ask Amy if Mrs. Miller could visit our house. "Let's hear what she has to say," Amy said, sounding as bored as I felt, so I instructed the guard to let her in. A little while later, there was a knock on the door. Amy unlocked the door to find what I could only describe as a complete mess. Her clothes looked like she had been sleeping in them. Her hair hadn't seen a brush in days, and she wore no makeup. Amy motioned her in. As she walked in, I noticed she avoided looking directly at me. Amy handed her some coffee, and she looked grateful as she took it. I started the conversation since Sarah came and sat down across from me, but did not look at me. Part of me felt sorry for the broken wreck in front of me, but I was also mad as hell at her. I felt a little bad for the broken wreck I had helped create until I remembered what she had done to me. "You look like garbage tied with string. What in the world happened to you?" That did it. She broke down completely. We couldn't get a word out of her for the next 10 minutes. Then she started, and through tears she explained, "He somehow found out that I was seeing Robert the whole time, and that the triplets weren't his. He went wild and tossed me out with just the clothes on my back. I booked into a motel. I still had my laptop in my car keys, and a couple $1,000 in my account. No one would talk to me after what I did to you. My family disowned me, and I had no friends. I called his father, Senator Miller, who told me he no longer needed me, as he now had his heir to the family fortune. When my dad finally agreed to talk to me, I called him, and he wired me a few thousand and told me not to call again. I had nowhere to go, so I spent the rest of my money traveling here, hoping Amy would take pity on me. I know you wouldn't piss on me if I was on fire and you didn't expect any help. If it means anything at all, I'm truly sorry for what I did. I was cruel and selfish, and I deserve my fate, but I miss my children, and I wish I had them back. Even though I was a terrible wife, I was a good mother." She looked at us like a kicked dog and stopped her perfectly practiced speech. While I knew she had practiced her speech, what she said was essentially true, so I felt a little bit of sadness for her. I also owed Scott a beating, but I could wait. He had orchestrated my suffering, and his turn was coming soon. When Amy asked if she was hungry, Sarah said she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Amy made some bacon, eggs, hash browns, then pancakes with syrup. She wolfed them down as fast as she could and asked for more coffee, which Amy provided. Amy then showed her to the guest bedroom to take a shower. While she was showering, Amy left some clothes on the bed that would fit her. Amy and I talked about what to do with our unwelcome guest while she was showering. Amy said that as much as she hated Sarah, she was her sister and felt obligated to help. I agreed, but only because it would irritate Scott to see Sarah back on her feet. We decided to put Sarah in the guest bedroom until we could make other arrangements. Tomorrow, Amy would take her clothes shopping at Walmart. Sarah came downstairs looking much more rested. We told her about our plans, and she started to cry again. Not long after, everyone went to bed. Amy and I sat up talking into the early hours, making some decisions we hoped would help solve this problem. I was used to getting up early and going to the gym and pool for an hour. Sarah had already beaten me to it and had coffee and buttered toast waiting. I joined Amy, who was already sitting at the table eating. Sarah joined us. "Jake, I'm so lucky. I don't know what to say. I honestly didn't expect this kind of welcome." "Sarah, what you did was unforgivable. You had your family stolen from you. Thanks to Amy and the love we share, I think I can finally forgive you, even though you still hurt me deeply. I'll never forget what you did, but I'm not going to dwell on it anymore, and I don't want you to apologize anymore. This chapter is closed, and a new one is opening. This morning, you're going shopping with Amy while I look for a place for you to live. Walmart is for your basics only today. We'll get you some more appropriate clothes later. See you later. I'm heading to the gym now." When I got home, the girls were gone, and the kids were at school, so I started looking for a place for Sarah to live. When I called the housing officer for our gated community, he said he had a 1-bedroom starter house for rent just 2 streets away. When I went to see it, I was shocked to find it fully furnished and ready to move into. The owner was a military officer who had been sent on a 3-year assignment to Europe and wanted to rent out his house. After a good look, I paid a year's rent plus the damage deposit. I told the girls the great news when they came home with enough clothes to fill a closet. Sarah hugged me and thanked me through tears. Amy just grinned at me and blew me a kiss. Then Sarah turned to me and whispered, "I must have been hit by a Martian cheater ray. I don't know what on earth I was thinking when I screwed up our marriage. I should never have let you leave. Amy, please take care of him. You'll never find a better man. I know I won't. Then she hurried upstairs to hide her emotions. When we were alone, I told Amy my intentions to help Sarah and destroy Scott and his dad. We loaded Amy's van and had the rest delivered the next day while Sarah was shopping for basics for her new house. The girls managed to find a place for everything. It was like Hermione's handbag from Harry Potter. I wasn't sure the house would fit everything we got. We decided to help Sarah financially to empower her. We gave her a credit card with 1,000 monthly limit and 10,000 to put into her checking account. More hugs and tears all around. That night in bed, Amy told me she was proud of me for not kicking Sarah when she was down and for being so compassionate. I just wanted Sarah to have learned her lesson and to treat her next man better. The next day, we all went over to Sarah's house to help her get settled. Not that it needed it, but Sarah insisted on doing all the housework herself, starting from top to bottom. She then insisted we all come over for dinner that night, as she wanted to cook something special for us. We left the children with a sitter and headed to her house just 10 minutes away. She sat us down and served a mouth-watering dinner, sirloin steak, baked potatoes, and mixed vegetables, including one of my favorites, fine beans with carrot and parsnips roasted with garlic butter and a drizzle of honey. For dessert, she made baked apples cored and stuffed with raisins, topped with ice cream. We left stuffed to the gills. Sarah settled in over the next few weeks. Amy and I agreed we would help her with her divorce, so I scheduled a meeting with an attorney Lisa had recommended. I arrived on time, and a man named Brian Scott introduced himself. I explained Sarah's situation to him, and while his reaction to her actions wasn't great, he agreed to take the case. Our main concern was getting the kids back. We weren't concerned with the financial aspect of things. I would figure all that out. I said I had an idea and mentioned I had given Scott permission to adopt the kids. Brian said it would be a major hurdle. I asked what would happen if the children were not my first priority. I said I had been offered $3 million for the kids, but had turned it down and given him permission to adopt for no financial gain. I had, however, sought $12 million as compensation for alienation of affection against both Scott and Innovate Solutions. I had signed a non-disclosure agreement, and they had agreed to this to keep Innovate Solutions' name out of the divorce proceedings. If I broke the agreement, I would have to pay the money back. I gave Brian the DNA reports that proved Robert Davis was the father, thereby proving the children were not mine. This meant Scott had no claim to the children, and the adoption wasn't official either. Sarah could get them back. I had no wish to hurt the children. I wasn't doing this just for Sarah. It would also be a good way to get back at Scott and his father. Brian told me to leave it with him, and he would get back to me. I had no idea that the children loved them. They just wanted someone with their name to carry on the business. That evening, I told Amy what I had done. She agreed completely, so we invited Sarah over. Sarah seemed a little nervous at first until I explained my plan. She thanked me profusely and threw her arms around me. Then she realized what she had done and pulled back, her hand over her mouth, tears starting and apologies pouring out. We both said simultaneously, "Don't worry about it. Just leave it at that." Several days later, Brian got in touch and asked me to bring Sarah to his office, as he would be representing her, not me. When the three of us went to see him, he presented his idea. He would file a motion calling for the adoption to be nullified. He would contact the DA's office to inform them that Scott Miller and his father, Senator Miller, had broken the law by attempting to buy 2 children in violation of the Anti-Slavery Act of 1865. Pursuing the aforementioned offense, they had coerced Mr. J. Carter into allowing them to adopt the 2 children. Since Mr. Carter could not provide such an undertaking and the 2 children were not fathered by him, the adoption is void. The attached DNA certificates will prove this. Mrs. Miller has requested that her children, currently at 218 B Norshus, be returned to her immediately, as they were taken against her will. He would start Mrs. Miller's lawsuit against Mr. Robert Davis for harassment, as he had coerced the then Mrs. Carter into an affair to keep her job. He would then start proceedings for Mrs. Miller against Mr. Scott Miller, as he had coerced the then Mrs. Carter into a relationship and eventually caused her to leave her husband, Mr. Jake Carter, thereby ruining her marriage. He would start legal action against Innovate Solutions for tolerating the harassment and even promoting the affair for Mrs. Miller. The CEO, Mr. Scott Miller, and the COB, Mr. Senator Miller, were aware of and, in fact, supported the affair and the breakdown of her marriage. He would start legal action against Mr. Robert Davis for alienation of affection, which helped to destroy his marriage to Mrs. Sarah Carter. He would start legal action against Mr. Scott Miller for alienation of affection, which ultimately destroyed his marriage. He would start legal action against Innovate Solutions for not including their own morality clause in their employee contract. They were aware that Mr. Davis was having an affair with Mrs. Carter and failed to act against them. He would start legal action against Innovate Solutions for not including their own morality clause in their employee contract and for actually supporting the affair between Mr. Scott Miller and Mrs. Carter, thereby guaranteeing the dissolution of Mr. and Mrs. Carter's marriage. Mr. Jake Carter admits he signed a non-disclosure agreement for $12 million. He would have to pay back the amount if he broke his promise. Mr. Carter is ready to keep his promise and pay back the $12 million as agreed upon in the contract. We all stood there, stunned after reading Brian's proposal for dealing with not only Innovate Solutions, but also Robert, Scott, and his father, Senator Miller. This was more revenge than I could have ever dreamed of. Sarah should be ready for the fallout, and she admitted her part in bringing this on herself. She was ready to face the consequences. I told Brian to move forward with the proceedings immediately and that Innovate Solutions would be facing a multi-pronged media exposure attack. It would be aimed mostly at Robert Davis, Scott Miller, Senator Miller, and finally, Innovate Solutions. Brian said he would be ready in 2 weeks, and I would launch my attack a week later. In the meantime, Brian would work to have the adoption revoked and Sarah's children returned to her. We left Brian's office with a new goal in mind, and I finally felt like I was heading toward some justice for the treatment I had been subjected to. Brian did try to get the kids back, but Scott and his father brought in a team of lawyers to fight the case. Brian released the rest of his legal proceedings during the second week of the battle. A week later, as agreed upon, I forwarded all the accumulated materials to every media source I could think of. This sped up the proceedings. As soon as the media smelled blood, they went for the jugular and camped outside the courthouse in all 3 homes of those named. As I expected, a flood of Innovate Solutions PR and marketing clients either threatened to terminate their contracts or did so. This resulted in an emergency board meeting for Innovate Solutions, and Robert Davis was fired without a severance package. In an attempt to stop their esteemed clients from bleeding out, both Scott and Senator Miller had to step down. They also agreed to pay Sarah and me a 7-figure fee. With the payoff I expected from my other lawsuits, I would more than cover the $12 million I owed for not keeping my mouth shut. From all of this mess came a gift for the country. Senator Miller's re-election ticket was based on family values, so he was forced to resign due to illness. Not long after he resigned, an audit revealed anomalies in his use of campaign funds, like paying for call girls on the campaign trail and spending that money on a vacation. The FBI was also interested, and he was called to answer for his behavior before a select committee. Less than a month after I went public, all claims had been resolved, and Sarah's children had been returned to her. Not long after their return, Amy and I drove Sarah and the children to her parents' house for a reconciliation. I told her parents that I had forgiven her and that we were now, if not exactly friends, at least amicable. I wanted them to forgive her too. It didn't hurt that they were seeing their grandchildren for the first time. Epilogue. Senator Miller served 4 years in jail after being found guilty of dishonest use of campaign money. I finally exacted revenge on Scott Miller after he was found guilty of attempted human trafficking for trying to buy 2 human babies. He was also found guilty of misplacing company money. 3 offshore accounts containing a large sum of money had been discovered, transferred from his work computer. I wonder how that happened. He spent 6 years in a government hotel. He would have only gotten 2, but he would not reveal where the other missing money came from. Actually, he didn't know. I had set them up. The final revenge for having me beaten up was my bribing the prison allocator to house a very vicious drug dealer with a fondness for male company. Sarah moved to a larger house, retook her bar exams, then started working for the same law firm as Lisa. We never socialized, but we occasionally watched each other's children. Sarah hasn't been on a date since, as she's been buried in her work and looking after the children.